Welcome, everyone, including all of our ISM members and our guests to our program today, hosted by ISM New Jersey. Today's presentation will be on Risk and Reward, Mastering Procurement for Financial Services. If you should have any questions or comments, please be sure to put it in our chat, and we will get to them as soon as possible. Our speaker for today is Ana Paula Zamorano. Ana Paula is the founder and chief executive officer of Resource Partners, LLC, a procurement and sourcing consultancy focused on driving value in third-party spend. Her firm develops strategies for cost optimization, technology enablement, procurement processes, contract negotiation, and risk management that align seamlessly with organizational goals. Her clients span from financial services to manufacturing and private equity firms. At this time, I'll turn the program over to you, Ana Paula.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks to the ISM New Jersey chapter for sponsoring this webinar. And thanks for making time every day for learning. I think that's important. So let's go ahead and get it started. I'll start just with just a tiny bit, a little bit more about myself. I think this will frame some of the conversation and the dialogue that I have. So I'm an engineer. I have a manufacturing engineering degree, and I have a master's in finance. I've spent my career, which is a number of years, in 4 companies. So I grew up at Alcoa, a very large industrial conglomerate, before known as the Aluminum Company of America. And I started in the automotive industry. And if you know anything about it, that's a process-heavy side of the house. And then I moved a lot internally in there, from engineering to operations to finance. So working in FP&A, and I was in a whole bunch of different business units for them, aerospace and others, weapon systems, aluminum, mining, production, always working very global. From there, I moved to Cargill, and you see cows and corn there, and that's exactly what we did. So an enormous industrial conglomerate, working globally, and I've worked across whether it be oil, edible oil, and all kinds of protein, flour, etc. And then I went to banking. So moved to sourcing, actually, at Alcoa, moved to banking. So literally I went from planes to chickens, and then went to banks and ATMs and everything else in between. So violent moves, and I'll talk about like a little bit of my perspective. So we're here to learn about why banking. What does procurement look at a bank? As Kathy mentioned, I'm the owner of Resource Partners, and enjoying the space of consulting. Personally, on my own time, I have 2 hobbies. I love to play tennis. I love to ride my bikes. You see my very cute dog, Camilla, and I'm a proud mom of 3 kids, and happily married to Robinson. So we'll start talking a little bit here about what to expect to learn today. And I think this is what made me think about why talk about procurement. For a lot of us that have at some point or another been in the supply chain of the house or other things, a common question that I get when I said I work for procurement, or I've consulted with procurement for bank or financial sector, a lot of times it's like, what do you buy? Do you buy money? Or so, which is sometimes people don't grasp what is that. So I thought it would be a fun, interesting topic to talk about today. So my intent is to really go over what are the strategies of technology, what's happening in the financial industry now, a lot of movement. So how does sourcing play a role in this space? What matters from a supply relationship management, and then what drives the teams? What are the things that really dictate how the procurement teams move and how they actually measure results, etc. So we got there a little bit of a loose agenda on what we want to talk about. I think Kathy's keeping an eye on the chat. We don't have to be so formal. So if you have a question in the meantime, something I'm covering and you want to know more about it, please feel free to put it in the chat, and Kathy chime in as with natural pauses in the presentation so we can cover that. So when I think of banking, and I think the little box here is covering the top, so I apologize for that. But anyway, when I think of banking, it's really, this applies to a whole bunch of industries, but it's people, complexity, priorities, but it all really at the beginning it starts with people. Procurement plays a huge role in mastering and managing and connecting the dots between a lot of different areas between the organization. Why banks? I mean, think about the enormous impact that they have from an economic development. They play a really unique role in the shape up of economy and movements and enablement. I mean, I've been involved in different projects that from a small business development with banks, how they support small businesses, and very integral part of the society of what we do, et cetera. So to me, it's been a fascinating industry to be on. Process is process heavy. We'll talk about a little bit more about the unique roles of where procurement plays in here. But number one industry you are, people, communication are absolutely critical, and I think probably very, very key for the financial industry. When actually Kathy shared with me some of the audience members today, and I thank you again for being here, but we have people from Boeing, we have people from Motorola, from Sumitomo, number of different pharmaceutical companies, several companies from the oil and gas sector. So what I thought about doing here to kind of frame, there's also several people from banks, different banks represented here. So hopefully some of these resonates here with you. But what I thought about doing here is just kind of laying out, I did this comparison, and by no means is intended to really, I don't pretend to speak for every bank and every procurement organization out there, but what I wanted to map is do a little bit of a comparison, right, between the manufacturing space, knowing that we have a number of people from Curious that are probably in some way or another in manufacturing. How does that compare to financial industry? So when I talk about ticket to play, right? If you don't have this, you have nothing. I mean, you don't pass go, right? What is that in the manufacturing industry? And at least in my experience across my very, very global experience in different manufacturing sectors, is quality, on-time delivery, and safety are absolute paramount when it comes to how the industry moves. So when I draw that parallel to how does that look and feel in the financial industry, I think of risk and regulatory compliance. So you're going to hear me say those words a lot because it's really the heart of how the banking world operates, or the absolute mind frame that has to happen. And not only in banking, but in other financial sectors that I'm working with, insurance or others, right? So nothing comes closer to procurement than the legal world. I mean, at the end, the product of our work comes and translates into contracts and relationships that we establish with third-party contracts. So with that said, I thought about maybe doing a differentiation. So from a manufacturing world, what really matters in a legal standpoint are all the clauses that protect intellectual property, or they're really, really focused and geared toward production and quality. And by all means, it's not the only focus, but those are like what really comes to mind in my head, right? In the financial industry, on the opposite side, is things related to data protection, to security, to risk, and how things move, how information moves in the banking system. Now, we love lawyers and we work with them every day in the procurement world, right? So we know that you can't talk contracts if you're not talking indemnification, warranty, limitation of liability. So there's some common stuff that translates perfectly or protected different industries, but at the end of the day, there actually applies the same in across different industries, and you can substitute manufacturing for any other one. Couple of things that maybe surprised me, having been in different worlds and in different industries: payment terms. I think in the manufacturing world, in our bunch of other industries, you kind of live and die by payment terms. Very, very important. Anything that touches working capital side of the house, inventory, et cetera. And while I'm not saying that the financial industry does not care for payment terms, it's never been KPI number 1 or 2 on my list of must do's in banking. It's relevant, but I would never say it's a focus area 100%, right? Sourcing, procurement, very important. Don't ever let anyone tell you differently. It's critical and it's strategic enabling financial organization or for manufacturing the world. Talk about key categories. We love to talk about category management in sourcing. So I would say here is direct materials, and then anything else that is related to indirect materials that affect production. If you spend 14 minutes in the manufacturing world, whether it be in automation, whether it be MRO, those are all things that are highly important, crucial categories in any manufacturing world on top of direct materials. In the financial world, this technology is service as a software as a service, and it's any basically technology that is key to the operational processes that the bank has. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll tell you 2 things that surprised me, right? The procurement process pretty much is the same, and there's a ton of transferable knowledge. So if you're there, let anyone tell you no. You have so much knowledge and so much information that you could bring to the table across industries. And I mean, I've done those jumps, and while they're violent, they're incredibly brain stimulating and fun to do. So one thing that really truly surprised me, I was once working on a contract for with a financial institution for engagement survey. Very important. I mean, we live and die by how employees are engaged and how they're working. And when we're talking with a very well-known company in this space, probably the leader in that, they say that the pool, how they compare from an engagement perspective, et cetera, in the financial industry, especially for those companies that have very heavy bank branch, they compare themselves with the retail industry. So I'm like, why are you giving me Target as a comparable pool of companies to benchmark against? And it's because the talent pool from bank tellers competes directly with the retail industry. So that was like an eye-opening for me. I never really expected that. Specific departments, just to keep it fun here: product manufacturing, quality control. Well, in the banking world, it's going to look very different. It's deposits, it's payments, it's treasury management, but it's not treasury management in the traditional sense of how treasury management operates for most companies. Here is actually also, they offer services, a lot of business-to-business type of services. Anti-money laundering. The first time I even heard that a group in an organization is the anti-money laundering. I was like, whoa, that kind of surprised me coming into the banking world. And I remember one time we were in a cross-department session with different people from the bank, everyone trying to drive collaboration, drive dialogue in between the parties, and they were talking about anti-money laundering. I remember there was this gal that was talking about being inside the bubble or outside the bubble. She herself had moved from HR to the anti-money laundering area and said coming in there, it was an absolute eye-opening for her because she saw how different the world was. And like, what does anti-money laundering do? I mean, all the bad actors out there, ultimately, and a lot of the bad things, whether it's drugs, whether it's illicit business, et cetera, they have to move money. And guess what? These guys try to do it through the banking system because it's there. So banks protect themselves by having really, really robust anti-money laundering teams, basically catching people from, is this legitimate money? Is this money coming from clean sources? Are these real businesses, et cetera? So it's just very, very interesting. And since I already talked risk a ton, here is third risk, party risk or vendor risk is also a very critical sector. I like this kind of comparison. Revenue segments in whether it's manufacturing, pharma, whatever, you have sales, you have product, you have service, specific areas. In the financial industry, the money-making guys are going to come from the lending, the mortgage, the insurance, the wealth management side of the house, and again, also treasury management. And then these are groups that every company probably has, and these are going to cover things like marketing, legal, communications, etc. So hopefully this kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor of what it is. So for those of you in the banking industry, as I said, this doesn't really illustrate absolutely everything. It's just my own read and perception of that. Stepping in a little bit more about the regulatory space, I think it's very, very important. Whatever industry that you are, that you truly understand what are the rules of the game, and there's an who regulates the financial industry. So it's a whole bunch of organizations with regulators. So is the Federal Deposit Insurance, is the Federal Reserve Bank, is the Office of the Controller of the Currency, and each one had their own regulations of what banks should do. And sometimes these things didn't really align with each other, right? So what happened was that last year they issue it's a meaty document, it's 18-page document that is called the Interagency Guidance, and it's issued by all these agencies. And there's one section specifically focused in procurement that talks about how procurement should manage, or how the bank should manage third-party relationships, which makes it really easy. I mean, you have basically your Bible, so your Bible of do's and don'ts, right? How should you conduct supplier due diligence? And some of these areas really go deep in the weeds as to what you should look into, what you shouldn't look into. So if you are a person that operates in banking, I highly recommend that, that you read these, because it will probably bring into light an understanding why your company or the bank that you're working for, the financial institution, does what they do. If you haven't read it, right? If you're in procurement, go read that, even though you may not be really dealing with that, but it will kind of make things sing for you. It talks about cyber security, it talks about supplier performance management. So in procurement, we do like to do a lot. I mean, procurement folks like to have KPIs, et cetera. Well, actually here is not because procurement says, it's actually because there is an obligation from banks and from financial industry to track how their suppliers are performing, and to have KPIs, and to have how basically things are working between organizations. There's a mandated termination or an opt-out of contracts. I could possibly talk about all the do's and don'ts that there are there, but there's a pretty clear way to understand what are the things that purchasing, procurement, sourcing should do when it comes to managing third-party relationships. Kathy, do we have any questions, anything that we should know, or keep going? I'll take silence.
Keep going. Keep going.
Okay,
I had
great.
to find the mute button.
Okay, that's great. That's great. So let me now move here and talk about FinTech and then banking as a service, just because I thought that would be a good information, one to frame how the groups, the areas that procurement serves, right? So I'll start by talking about FinTech. And if you're anywhere near, you probably know these by heart. And it's a really complex, fast evolving, what is true today is not true tomorrow. Basically, set of ecosystem of technologies, companies, processes that facilitate processes in the banking industry. I think all of us as consumers have, one way or another, have come and work with, whether it be with your banking app, whether it be with your, Apple Pay, you name it. There's a lot of payment portals. There's a lot of things that really, some of these compete with traditional banking services. Some of them are enablers of traditional banking services. There's a lot of firms in the private equity space that have a niche in the FinTech side, and some are really, really broad, and some are very, very small. And what they do is very important to how banking operates. I'll touch a little bit about what is banking as a service. So Nowadays, there's a lot of companies that operate and provide some level of, they have a really cool app, they have a really good service, they have some level of, they're offering basically traditional banking products, whether it be a checking account, whether it be a lending solution, or whether it be anything related, a loan or something. They're not actually allowed, they're not licensed and regulated to operate as a bank. So what happens is that banks then provide these services, banking as a service. If you've heard of software as a service, or SaaS, this is banking as a service, is like the equivalent, but is banks providing the services via API or application program interface. And then the banks are the ones that bear all the regulatory and complex space to basically for these companies to provide services to consumers. I mean, one thing that comes to mind nowadays, you go to a store and there's sometimes like instantaneous financing. You can pay $100 now or pay $33. Offer some of these products is really the banks that are providing this API and are offering the services behind the scenes. So if you read all the terms and conditions, sometimes that you click in a payment app or something, there might be a bank providing that service, but it's not necessarily the name that you're seeing in your application. So one more, as I said, this is really, really fast moving. So for procurement, it's very important to move fast, to keep up with things, to evolve as things are evolving, to keep involved and reading like what's happening from a market intelligence perspective, who's coming, who's going, who's partnering with whom, which private equity firm owns what part of the equation, who else they own and invest. It will help make sense of a lot of things when you're negotiating contracts, when you're crafting a strategies. It really will kind of make things clear for you. So that's a bit of flavor. This comes in the form of a lot of SaaS offering, a lot of different solutions, etc. That are important. I'll move here and talk about. So what role does procurement play in the technology space?
Ana Paula, we do have one question.
Yeah.
We do have one question that came
in. Go
ahead.
Ahead.
Sure. How do you think the banking landscape will change with the Justice Department suing Visa?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think for sure there will be some changes. Traditionally in the U.S., the interbank or the fees that are charged by credit card are significantly higher than they are in other countries. So who knows? I mean, but there's also strong lobbying and a strong everything. I think there's what I've seen in the financial industry is if you don't like how it looks today, just wait a little bit because it's going to look different. Exactly how it's going to look, I couldn't even tell you. I mean, us as consumers, our expectations are perpetually changing. I was actually just reading an article, Kathy, in MX, that the average consumer, so all of us here in this call, the anticipate or like the tolerance that we have when you want to conduct you want to go pay a bill online or you want to do something, we want to get it done in 60 seconds. So imagine how all these technology evolving and how things are moving with the business. I haven't read enough to what's, what are the latest things happening with Visa, but I think things will probably continue to evolve, just as the last year that regulatory direction came from these inner agencies. So hopefully that answers probably not as deep, but anyway, thanks for the question. Keep them coming. So what role does procurement play in the technology space? Sourcing is SaaS is very critical. So if you've not been in any way or form involved in sourcing anything in technology, I think it's very important that you come and understand that. When I talk about understanding supplier offerings, I have an interesting thing, and I've sourced a ton of things, but death data. So when people die, why does the bank even care about that? Well, banks care a ton about death data because there's a lot of fraud that could happen. There's a lot of regulatory things saying how banks should treat accounts when people die. Think about life insurance, think about how account management, they're done to preventing fraud, etc. So if you think about all the different verticals at a bank, you have insurance, you have, I talked earlier about those areas, right? Deposit side, payment side, so accounts get frozen. But the bank, there's multiple needs for death data. And just like any furnishing data, there's a number of different sources. And I actually had an opportunity to work with an organization that there were multiple uses of that data, but guess what? The wealth management team had their own death data. The banking, the traditional bank branching had their own death data, and insurance had their own death data. I'm like, you guys are buying the same thing 3 times, right? So if procurement can be that conduit that understands the overlap in your needs across your stakeholders, I mean, there's good way to bring about value, right? As I just mentioned, what are the consumer expectations? How's the market evolving? That's very important because then you can be that source of information and intelligence to the business, right? And connecting dots, et cetera. The robust supplier relationship. I mean, this applies to, I don't care what industry you are, but a robust supplier relationship management is really key enabling for the business, for them to extract value from the company. And that's something that I think, especially, in an area where there's not a lot of times the department, sometimes they don't know what the other area is doing. I had an opportunity to work on a lockbox. So if you pay attention when you send, where your credit card bill gets sent, they all go to a PO box number, whatever, in X or Y city. A lot of times these are called lockbox services. They receive your check, they apply the check and your payment, and they do it very, very efficiently. But it's really knowing that supplier, it's not only a payment process, but they can do a lot of other things. They can do customer service. I had the opportunity once to basically expand and augment the services that a lockbox provider was giving. They already embedded in the operation. They already had some connectivity. They already had a lot of different things. And there was some needs and some printing. There was some needs and some customer service and getting some agents for some conversion that a bank was doing through that really spike up the demand in a call center from that. So it's really, if you hold the key to this knowledge, and if you are a person that is constantly seeking information and bringing up your value and translating that to your stakeholders, that really adds value. And I think that's one way that sourcing can really drive the value for the organization. And then other things. This is everyday things. So efficiency and how purchase orders gets caught, how data analytics are run. I mean, we have a lot of systems nowadays that can streamline a lot of that. Contract negotiations. There's a lot of things that are very unique to the industry, and there's a lot of things that are any good practices from a procurement standpoint will carry across different industries. So
we just got one more question in.
Go ahead.
Will you be, or can you define what a robust supplier relationship program looks like, means to you / here?
Sure. So, I mean, I've actually been invited to talk about this in several other groups and meetings with different organizations. And I think it starts with a segmentation. So I'll try to kind of just distill it down to a simple few things, but it starts with segmenting of your suppliers. So which ones are the ones that you're going to be dealing? Think about, office supplies. So what are the things that you're buying that you can truly fully leverage? What are the things that you have that have a more impact into your operation? And what are the processes that you're going to have. You're going to have some critical suppliers, you're going to have some leverageable suppliers, you're going to have everything in between. And I think that robust supplier relationship program is having the right strategy for that. So to your critical suppliers, start small, but put a program where you're communicating and you're giving each other a scorecard about how you're doing as a customer and how they're doing, where you communicate what's coming down the pipeline from whether in your bank product delivery or in your manufacturing environment. So share what you're doing with your with your absolutely critical suppliers, because there's probably more value that you can pull. And at the beginning, in my experience, a lot of these programs start almost like a mandate from executives, from procurement, from whatever. But if it's done well, it's going to really solidify the relationship and honestly translate into increased total cost of ownership and increased benefit for your supplier, potentially increased business and others. So if you've not dive a lot into the whole SRM, it's a methodology, depending of which book you read, which practice you follow, 5-step, 3-step, whatever. But there's basically a methodic process in how you're dealing and where you're spending the bulk of your time. And there's a business case for your suppliers to be scorecard and measure and analyze how you're working. And there's also an absolute business case for executive to executive pairing between companies to really drive value for both organizations and track and evolve it. What your supplier relationship management or SRM program is on year one, what it is in year one, and what it is in year 3 and 4, it will also be evolving as your needs evolve, as the maturity of that program evolves. So I hope that answers. It's a fascinating topic. I'm always absolutely passionate about sourcing and procurement and the value that it can bring. So I always view that as an absolute value enabler, just as technology or other things. I'll move here and talk about how to balance risk and reward, right? So I think whether it be Harvard, the financial organization calls it third-party risk, vendor risk, however you call that, but work close with that people. Even if you're in the buyer side of the house and you're not necessarily interacting with them, make a point to go meet these people and understand what it is. Go read the regulatory mandate for financial institutions to follow, and I think that gives you already a leg up. One of the things that in the regulatory space, any critical suppliers, you have to have a solid strategy. You have to have a plan B. If your banking application supplier, whatever you're using, goes under, how are you going to really provide banking services, online banking services for your company? So understand that and then see how you can craft that. And that comes from really talking to the businesses, et cetera, right? And even though you may be in a analyst role, I mean, I saw all levels of organization being present today, from presidents to CPOs to different people that actually were signed up for today. So my recommendation is really get to know the people that are managing risk, but the reality, the people that are managing risk is not only the people in the third-party risk. Everyone in a banking organization is involved in managing risk. So when it comes to procurement, a lot of times, if you have the natural wire in a procurement brain is like savings, that's not all. You can always get that. Shouldn't ever be all for any industry you are, right? Value comes on quality, value comes on delivery, value comes on cybersecurity and other things that also come there. So understand what there is. And then I talked about leveraging that supplier innovation across BUs. That's one good way to really get deeper with those suppliers that are really well established and have great value to bring to our organization. I had a learning lesson many years ago. I was actually talking to a business unit president in the he was in the aluminum roll products. And I came and I'm talking all about savings and payment terms and whatever. And the guy basically asked me if I had a clue about how that business unit was measuring, tonnage per dollar per whatever. And I had no clue. And it was a really kind of humbling learning lesson for me that I need to always tie my business objectives, whether you're doing a transformation, whether you're in a procurement team or whatever, to what the business needs are. If you don't understand the business needs and how they're being measured, you're not able to really balance that risk and reward. You need to speak that to be able to bring value, right? So there's always a business case for doing things more efficient and how companies acquire things. And I would say understand what's the end customer impact. So what we're doing, what does that mean to the end customer? How is that connection? Even if it's from your own employee engagement or whatever it is, but look at things from a total cost of ownership. Don't ever compromise, at least in the financial side, anywhere, right? But to go with a lesser player just because it's cheaper, because that in the longer term will cost you dearly. So that's what I talk about, managing that risk and reward. Be demanding with your suppliers when it comes to where you hold them and what they have to do. A lot of times I have had suppliers push back on negotiations with third party, right? That they're like, they don't want to do these, they don't want to add these clauses. And a lot of times what works best for me is say, hey, it's not me that is saying this. Look at this. This is what the regulators are expecting the financial institution to do. So I'm not being picky and saying I have to have a KPI in this contract just because I'm being picky with you. It's like that's part of the regulators' mandate in these. And there's different level. I mean, obviously there's different depending on risk rating. Each supplier in the financial world gets a risk rated, whether it is 1, 2, 3, 4, critical, high, low. I mean, there's different measurements that I've seen. So once you understand the risk that supplier and the engagement that it has, a lot of this regulatory space in the risk is really focusing protecting bad actors that I talked about. How the anti-money laundering, how your own information, we all have bank accounts somewhere, right? So how is the bank being super diligent to make sure that your money stays where it is? There's no fraud going in your account. So think about what you're contracting, what you're doing, how is that impacting all the way to how consumers, what they're getting, the products they're getting, and how they're being protected. So any other questions? No,
we just had one comment. It's from Laura. In IBM, oftentimes it's stopped at TPRM, and SRM is so much more than that.
It is. Whether you're at IBM or you're at a smaller firm, I mean, companies like IBM, in my experience, they have incredibly robust processes, but third-party risk management, which was talking about TPRM and supplier relationship management. I mean, there's a lot. It's a very involving, and I don't view that the responsibility of just the vendor risk team. Is really the responsibility of every person. Everybody owns risk at a financial institution. If you come from a manufacturing environment, you've heard things like everybody owns safety. It's kind of, I mean, to me, that kind of, they go hand in hand. I don't know if I'm hitting the question, but it was not a question, it was a comment. And I agree that they're very robust ways. So it's a way of mind. You're not just practicing safety, or you're not just practicing being good third-party risk advocate because you're doing a questionnaire and looking into your supplier. He said the way you run and the way you operate. If you like working out, that's who you are. That's what you do. That's a way of life. That's basically the same thing when it comes to the mindset inside of banks. I don't care what area you are. You may be a marketing expert and you're contracting things related to advertising and whatever, but there's still an absolute prevalent area about third-party risk management, and not only third-party, but all risk management within the operation. So good call out there.
And I have one follow-up comment on that. When suppliers start questioning clauses that are anchored to regulatory requirements, time to rethink things. My favorite is when suppliers tell me they're not held accountable to regulatory requirements.
That's a classic. I've heard that not a small number of times. And yeah, they're not. I mean, if you are providing me a software solution, you're certainly not held to the Office of the Controller of the Currency of Regulation. But if you're selling to me, you're indirectly doing that. And if you can't possibly agree to what that mandate is doing, I mean, and it's a trade and it's a balance, but then, I mean, if it's an absolute one thing that all information in the banking industry, so when it comes to data storage, when it comes to where companies store data, where they service, all the data must remain in the U.S. That's a very, very different, I mean, a very important clause in for banks, right? And it doesn't mean that it cannot be accessed from outside. I mean, there's a lot of servicing now done from a lot of different countries. There's operations everywhere, but at least as it relates to the U.S. And there's a lot of banks that operate across different geographies, and they're subject to the European laws, the whatever. But if they're servicing in the U.S., data has to remain here. There has to be all kinds of controls. And a lot of times in this, in the risk space is what is called the inherent risk rating. So what's the nature of the relationship and what you're doing? If you're sharing a lot of data, if that supplier has access to bank records, to customer data, so you have a really elevated risk. But then what are the controls from a cybersecurity, from access control, from SOC report, et cetera, that are basically diminishing or lowering that risk because you have the right recipe and the right tools in place to control that. So if a supplier tells you that, I mean, there's always that need for pushing, but to have that dialogue, right? I mean, pushing sometimes will not do until they really understand what's behind, even that may not be themselves subject to that regulatory obligations. To speak the industry language, I like here, what I like is to be involved, right? Whether you're talking about facilities, whether you're negotiating something that has a heavy impact from a real estate perspective, or you're doing something on a correspondent bank. So what does a correspondent bank do for a bank? There's a lot of work that banks do with other banks. And procurement gets involved in these things on how trade finance occur, and how international money settlement occurs, clearing services between organizations. So really get deep and understand that. I'm a huge proponent of market intelligence, of understanding. One advice that I always give people is find one or two or three really good publications, but don't let them be something, be a lifelong learner. Don't let it be something that just hits your inbox and you immediately hit delete. Make time to read those things. Make time to understand regulations. Make time to understand what's really driving the financial industry. And for this matter, I mean, this slide could apply to just about any area that you're working with, right? But if you're communicating with your business, with your stakeholders, understand what are their worries. And I talked about having metrics and KPIs that align to how the business is measured. So do that. So well, not all suppliers are equal, not all risk is equal, but understand what matters to your stakeholders. I think that's really, really important. To me, a guiding principle in these is how you're bringing value. How are you a real good partner? Now, long time ago, one of my very first procurement bosses, after I left my finance world and after I left my engineering world, he said, until the stakeholders that you're working for know that they will be remiss if they're not working for you, then you're not a true partner to them. Where they would not move without you being with them, because otherwise there's value, there's risk, there's whatever. So think about what is the knowledge you have to really understand and have that sensitized to what their needs are. One thing that I really like is that my last bullet here. I mean, we can all be consumers of things, and I've done this myself where I'm like, I want to know, I'm doing all these contracts for all these products, for all these things. What does it mean? Like, I want to go and open an account with this institution, and I want to see what it is. How is the process to opening a checking account? Is it clunky? Is it not? Set foot at a branch. Open an account. When you do those things, you're going to have a different level of understanding that just from the back office stay in the procurement world. I mean, if you're not working in the heart transplant industry, by all means, customer service and experience, everything, go ahead and do it, because he's going to really put things at a very different angle when you look at what does that mean, right? I actually, I'll give you an example. I've been supporting banking operations and others, and going into a branch and saying, hey, that ATM, I've done that contract for that ATM. I understand how this works. I understand that there's a lot more. When you see an ATM, it's not only the box, is who's servicing it. There's a software piece of it. There's a servicing piece of it. There's a maintenance piece of it. There's someone that comes and actually puts the money in it. There's so many things that when you go and look at things, and there's other things like teller products or others, that when you go and look at these things, it really puts things in a very, very different light. So that's what I advise. There's no one perfect way to learn. Just find a way that works for you. Keep learning, and that's how you bring value to your stakeholders. So hope that was of value. I want to open it up for any other questions, comments that the audience may have.
Please put your questions in the chat if you have something for Ana Paula for today. I don't see anything at the moment right now, though. But any last closing thoughts or that you'd like to mention while we're waiting for any more questions?
And I invite you all to connect with me in LinkedIn if I can be a resource. If there's something crossing your mind, I'm pretty responsible. Please feel free to connect. And if you're curious about procurement and the financial industry, I encourage you to learn more. I encourage you to engage. It's a fun industry. It's forever going to be needed, right? And if you are in the financial industry, happy to connect. Also, I hope they brought some value to you guys. So thank you for hosting me, Kathy. This was a good meeting. Thank you.
Oh, this was great. We should actually have you back and do another topic, probably on supplier relationship.
I'd love that for sure. Yes.
Oh, we would love it too. Well, I just want to let you know, a lot of people are sending thank yous. They felt the presentation was very worthwhile, and appreciate you coming and joining us today.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. I'm going to close out the